Good evening, everybody. I hope you're well this evening. Please can I welcome everyone to the meeting of Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of March 26. What a glorious day it's been. The time is 6:30 p.m. and I'm Councillor Caroline Brooke, Chairperson of the committee. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing later. Please ensure that mobile phones are switched off or on silent, and in the event of emergency or need to evacuate, or the fire alarm will then sound and follow the instructions of the team. I'd like to welcome all the members and visiting all the members of the public, including our lovely Corinne Bishop and and Rebecca Hallett and Inspector Kirby at the back there, who I will introduce shortly. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to you. I understand it's your last week and today is your last day, and did you hold on for today especially because you knew I wanted you here? So this is my favourite scrutiny every year, and so thank you so much for being here on your last day. Really appreciate it. I'd like to record our sincere thanks for coming along and keeping us updated, and for everything you've done for Winchester District as a whole. And wish you every success in your future role. So turning to the agenda, apologies, I believe we have none, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So we have no apologies from members of the committee. I have been asked to pass on apologies from the Chief Executive, who unfortunately can't be with us tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Wallace.
I need to declare that I've been disclosable pecuniary interest in respect to the agenda items due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. A similar declaration to Councillor Wallace's, but on account of my membership of the South Downs National Park Authority.
Thank you, Councillor Pett. No announcements from me this evening. So turning to item 4, minutes of the meeting of the 10th of February 26, pages 5 to 12. Can the minutes of the meeting be signed as correct record, please? Thank you. Okay, public participation. So we have Ian Tate who wants to speak on item 7. So he's not in the room. So I think we'll get to item 7 probably. Oh, I know he is. Yeah. But he's in a meeting. Annual community safety update, turning to item 6. So the recommendation is that the committee acknowledge the community safety partnership progress report and agree any matters of significance with the cabinet member for healthy communities. So Councillor Becker will introduce for us.
There we go. Thank you. This is our annual report of the Community Safety Partnership, which is so ably chaired by our own Sandra Tuddenham. The overall report recommends that we acknowledge the Community Safety Partnership's progress report, agree any matters of significance with me, and it captures the activity undertaken for the first 3 quarters of the financial year 25-26. It specifically relates to our priorities of high harm crime, antisocial behaviour and open space actions. We talk quite a lot in the report about domestic violence and violence against women and girls. As you will note within the report, we do refer largely to women as victims of violence, as it has been in previous years, and there is clear evidence within the report to support that fact, but we do recognise other forms of domestic violence as well, of course. The report also touches on street homelessness. This doesn't include those who may be sofa surfing though. The number of individuals being found by outreach is currently low. This is down to the tireless efforts of specialist providers that the CSP put in place to ensure access to crash beds and night beds, in addition to the work that our amazing housing team do. We also use SWEP and the winter pressure funding to keep people off the streets. To put this into the context of the report, it means that the majority of those who may be attached to a wider street community during the day are in fact accommodated or have been offered accommodation. The crime data does show some data increases, which I'm sure Corin will touch on, and that's included at Appendix 3. Sandra, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
As always, I'm here just to answer the question. Oh, sorry. I'm loud anyway, but I'm here to answer the questions.
Thank you. And Corin, I think this is Corin's last meeting with us as well.
It is.
So if we could show her.
We've
our
just
thanks
done
as
all
well.
that. You missed
Okay,
it. Sorry.
sorry, I forgot my swipe card, so I was downstairs.
I've got an update for you if you're happy for me to continue.
Yes, please. That would be lovely. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you, Chair. As District Commander for Winchester, I want to use this update to focus on the people, partnerships and priorities that sit behind the data you already have within your reports. Our emphasis continues to be on visible, connected and victim-focused policing that relentlessly targets those that cause the most harm. So our current district priorities and emerging themes, first one is antisocial behaviour and shoplifting within Winchester City Centre. So our joint work with the bid rangers, neighbourhood services, community safety officers and retailers continues to deliver a coordinated response to city centre demand. This includes targeted patrols, intelligence sharing and firm action against repeat offenders via our community behaviour orders and licensing interventions. The data speaks for itself with formal action of our shoplifters at over 41%, that we are actually charging people. We're also working really hard with Whiteley Shopping Centre to support businesses in that location as well. Second priority is around rural crime. Rural crime remains a core priority, financially, emotionally and socially to those that it affects. We've created 2 new rural local bodies which have been funded by our Police Crime Commissioner, which are going to be based at Bishops Waltham and Alresford, so that increases our capacity. These dedicated officers are strengthening community links, improving rural intelligence and increasing confidence. We also have a rural crime task force and country watch teams who continue to support our district with expert investigations and cross-border operations. This includes heritage and wildlife crime, farm and plant theft, organised rural offending, enforcement linked to livestock worrying. They're also available for specialist crime prevention advice. This combined and local specialist model is significantly improving our rural policing footprint. Our third one is our crime associated with an HMP Winchester. A substantial proportion of our investigative workload comes from inside the prison. This includes drugs, violence and weapons. We continue to work closely with the prison to disrupt these offences, safeguard vulnerable prisoners and pursue prosecutions wherever possible. And our partnership in this area has gone from strength to strength, which includes both a tactical and we also now have a strategic prison partnership board that's chaired by an assistant chief constable. And our fourth priority remains our nighttime economy and violence against women and girls. Protecting women and girls in the nighttime economy remains a top priority. We are and we have been deploying behavioural detection officers, running plainclothes operations targeting predatory behaviour, checking venue compliance with Ask Angela, and safe staffing, using licensing powers and pub watch sanctions, and conducting proactive vulnerability checks in the early night, not just reacting after the incident. This proactive approach is changing behaviour and supporting women's safety and confidence in the city at night. So those are our priorities. However, partnership is the core of how we work. We continue to maintain strong partnership relations across all our agencies, in particular the team that has daily and weekly contact with our colleagues through the City Council, especially those within the community safety team, housing tenancy and the Council's ASB officer Dawn Gretton. We have a schools partnership. Our engagement with schools across Winchester District continues to grow, focusing on early intervention for emerging risks, broad awareness and healthy relationship education, anti-drugs and anti-exploitation sessions, visible patrols at start and finish times when they are needed, and problem solving with safeguarding leads. This work is really essential to prevent vulnerability before it escalates. We also have our overall partnership meeting, which is offender, victim and location, and this is a multi-agency process, remains one of our most effective mechanisms for managing high-risk individuals and locations. This is where partners come together to put the right management, support and enforcement around the riskiest people and places. So through Oval, we have jointly identified emerging risks, we share intelligence, we agree partner-owned interventions, and we manage individuals involved in repeat antisocial behaviour, violence, knife carrying, drug harm and vulgar concerns. Operation Fortress is around our drug and vulnerability partnership. Operation Fortress continues to be a highly effective partnership structure for tackling drug supply and protecting vulnerable people. Through Fortress, we share intelligence across all our agencies, coordinate enforcements against dealers and county lines, and support vulnerable drug users at those at risk of cocooning. We also can then map our emerging hotspots, escalate urgent risk for immediate response, and then link into education, health and housing partners into safeguarding plans. Fortress ensures that drug-related harm is not just an enforcement issue, but a whole system safeguarding response. And then finally, our bid and raging model. This is still one of the strongest city-based assets. This gives us real-time intelligence sharing, joint patrols and visible reassurance, rapid response to antisocial behaviour and retail crime, and consistent presence during peak times. So looking ahead for our priorities for 2026, visibility and local confidence is key. We need to maximise the impact of our rural posts. Bishop's Waltham front office is now open as of this week. It has been closed since before Christmas, which will hopefully provide a visible, accessible point of contact for residents and improving reporting and early problem solving. High harm offenders, we've got tight management through our community behaviour orders, licence enforcement and data-driven targeting. Rural prevention, strengthen our proactive nighttime economy and expanding our educational work within schools. Rural crime, we need to deepen our collaboration and grow that community intelligent network, because we need that intelligence and that information to come in to be able to tackle rural crime. Reducing prison generated demand by maintaining strong relationships and targeted interventions within HMP Winchester will help with this, and youth intervention and early support. So in closing, Winchester remains a safe district because of the strength of its partnership across policing, education, health, local government, the voluntary sector and our local communities. Our increased visibility, specialist support for rural crime, proactive work, multi-agency risk management and Operation Fortress and Oval all position us strongly for the year ahead. As you've all mentioned, next week I will be moving on as of today, starting up a training department at Netley. So this will be my last Community Safety Ship board. After 3 years working here, I can honestly say that Winchester is one of the best districts in the force, not just in terms of performance, but because of the partnership strength, trust and genuine collaboration that actually exists across the city and the whole district. Everything we achieved has been as much about how we work together as what we actually deliver. You are, however, being left in exceptionally capable hands. Matt Kirby, who many of you already know, has worked alongside me for the last 3 years. He understands the city, understands the communities, this partnership, and importantly, understands the challenges and opportunities ahead. He's absolutely the right person to be stepping up, and I have full confidence in him and the district team. Finally, I'd like to extend my special thanks to Sandra in her role within the Community Safety Partnership, and I know Laura's not here, but also to Laura. Both of their support has been invaluable in helping me navigate the political and council landscape. When I first started here, I didn't know about any of it. So their guidance, insight and willingness to collaborate has made a significant difference, and I'm truly grateful. Thank you. I value the conversations, the shared problem solving, the honesty and the humour, whether that's been walking with you through the high street to the cathedral. On the many occasions we've spoken about how to make Winchester even safer. It has generally been a pleasure working with all of you. Thank you for your support, your commitment and your partnership, and it's been an honour to serve as your district commander. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the last report. Thank you for being here this evening. And as Corinne Bishop mentioned, we've got Matt Kirby at the back, Inspector Matt Kirby, who will be stepping into his shoes. We also have Rebecca Hallett, who I believe is coming in to help tackle antisocial behaviour. Is that correct?
Yeah, the antisocial behaviour lead and public space lead within the community safety team.
Fabulous. So welcome to you as well. So thank you for both being here this evening. It's much appreciated. So coming on to questions, do we have any questions from the group? Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I feel a bit guilty now to ask you anything because you're leaving, so I apologise before I start, Corinne. May I just bring to your attention that just recently, one area in Wickham experienced a lot of car windows being smashed, but unfortunately, according to the residents, that once the report was submitted, no one took responsibility. The local PCSO was informed, but the residents are just told to direct all questions to 101 with no meaningful engagement to follow up to the incident reported. I've mentioned it to Sandra, so I just wondered if you could give me an update as to where that would be, why that happened. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Clear, without having all the information, I can't talk directly about a specific incident, but if you would like to forward that, we can make sure that some contact is made. What I would say, if people feel that they haven't been heard, we still need people to report crime. When people report crime, it gets recorded, it will get triaged, and if we notice that there's, so for example, lots of vehicles have been broken into, we'll be making sure that we send people out. So if you want to send me those details, Councillor Clare, we'll make sure that we can follow that up.
And could I, sorry, just come back on that? Is that all right? Do you keep, because ward councillors and parish councillors updated well enough, do you think, on certain areas and incidents? Thank you.
Could you be a bit more specific on what you mean?
Well, when I speak to parish councillors or anything, they say, well, we never hear from them. So, you know, even if incidents are reported, do you ever report back and say, yes, we've looked into this and this is the state of play at the moment?
Anyone who is a victim of crime will get an update. You can also all access on our policing system on Hampshire Constabulary website. You can see all the crimes within your area, so you can actually get that data yourself for your meetings. We need to get you linked in with each of your local officers so that you know who they are, and that's the officer that you need to be going to ask those questions. I can't guarantee that they'll be able to attend every single meeting, but hopefully going forward we can try and get that in place, that when they can, they will.
Councillor Power.
Sure. A couple of questions. It's really good news that you're boosting resources in Alresford, because I hear lots of anecdotal tales of crime, but I always tell them to report them, and I suspect they are not. I couldn't see anything in these statistics about rural and wildlife crime, which I'm led to believe is happening. Is there a reason why there's nothing in the report about those, or is it just not being reported?
No, it is being reported. That isn't something we've added into this report. It can be going forward if that's something you would feel would be beneficial.
Chairman, I think it's really important that we are seen to be representing the district as a whole when we're looking at policing, and that is not evident from this report. It's not just about the city. Rural crime has what I feel is a disproportionate effect on people's lives, and I would very much like to strengthen that reporting. Thank you.
So you'd like to add in the rural animal crime? Okay. Noted. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Corinne. Just a couple of questions about the actual report and making sure I understand it correctly. So when you refer to, and it's referred to as formal action taken and further action taken within the report, is that when someone's charged for the crime? Okay. Go on.
So formal action taken is a number of things. It can be from a caution to a conditional caution to a charge. So all of those are formal actions taken. Does that make sense?
So my follow-up on that, now that I'm clear about that, is so it's a good thing if you can bring further action, I guess, and it's shown as a positive outcome if you can. How can you improve that? What's within you, or is it just circumstantial, is what I guess I'm trying to understand about whether you can take further formal action. Thank you.
So in relation to further action and for formal action to take forward, we need the evidence to support that. So we have to reach what's something called a threshold test. So there are some crimes, for example, Councillor Clear talked about windows in vehicles being smashed. If we haven't had anybody seen it, or we don't have any evidence, we won't be able to take formal action against somebody because we don't know who it is. So that's where it's really important that people report things to us, even if we can't do anything at the time. It may help create a bigger picture later on. And each of those, I'd like it to a jigsaw. Each of those little jigsaw pieces will hopefully then build that bigger picture. We can't always take formal action, but we try wherever we can.
Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Inspector, I don't know whether you've had a chance today to look at the Daily Mail online. And if I can quote from there, it says, Winchester, a cathedral city often voted among the best places to live in the UK, has now got an intimidating atmosphere, families have claimed, saying they were too scared to visit the quaint city centre because of homeless people asking for money. Now, I have to say that I recognise your far more upbeat picture that you painted for us earlier on. And I'm rather ashamed to say that I think that quote is sourced from one of our members of this council at a previous meeting this month, or at the end of last month. I wonder if you could give your reaction to that piece in the Mail today.
It's very hard to give a reaction. I haven't actually seen that.
Okay, would you say Winchester was an intimidating city now?
I don't feel it's an intimidating city. All the work that we do collectively with the bid ranges, with our officers to support people that are intimidating within the high street, we continue to do that. We've got a number of people that have community behaviour orders that can't come to the high street, and those that are committing offences we have arrested, and we have quite a few that are in prison.
Thank you.
Sandra, would you like to come in there?
Yes, thank you. I think there's a lot of multi-agency partnership working going on in terms of managing those who are homeless. Councillor Becker has already explained that the level of homelessness has actually reduced quite significantly, and there are individuals who congregate together as the sort of street community in the day, but they are managed by high-vis patrols and a lot of outreach work as well. So our outreach workers are out first thing in the morning. They can be called out any time in the day. So I'd say that we've had quite a significant impact on the high street and the issues that we've probably been experiencing over the last few years. We do have a public space protection order in place for alcohol related antisocial behaviour. That seems to be working really well, and we do have our own antisocial behaviour officer who can be called out to pair up with a bid ranger or one of the local police officers. So I would say in terms of partnership focus, we are doing everything that we can. We also look at diversion, intervention, and obviously we will use enforcement around community protection warning notices if those individuals don't want to engage with us. So I'd say that's probably, I haven't read the article myself, but I would say that we're in a good place at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baffo.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have another question, but actually just following on from Councillor Pett, I think reporting of that particular meeting was actually about the PSPO that you just referred to. Just wondering, in terms of the use of that, how many times is that sort of actually needing to be used within Winchester in terms of the sort of activities that might then sort of require that sort of to be invoked. Thank you.
Just to avoid any confusion, the meeting that's being referred to was the HIP meeting of last week, where there was a presentation not in relation to the current PSPO we have for alcohol. It was talking about whether or not further PSPOs would be appropriate for the city centre. So just so no one's getting confused as to when we talk about PSPOs, we're not talking necessarily about the one that we already, Sandra's talking about the one that we already have, but just so everyone's clear, that meeting and that discussion was not focused on the current PSPO. It was about the possibility of using PSPOs for further purposes.
Yes, you referring to the current PSPO. How many times is that sort of the conditions of that actually used by relevant officers in the conducting of their activity? Thank you.
Well, I can say that it's probably used on a daily basis, and in some cases it's changed the way that our street drinkers actually consume their alcohol. So when I started here a few years ago, there was quite a lot of overt drinking out of bottled vessels, etc. But now they're quite often hidden in a coffee cup or some other vessel, which is not so obvious. But in terms of the intervention, more often than not, if an officer asks the person to stop drinking, then they stop drinking. Otherwise, they can have their alcohol confiscated, and obviously they don't want that to happen. So the confiscation of alcohol is probably not that often, because a uniformed officer will normally persuade that person to stop drinking in that public place. And that's because they're causing ASB, alarm, harassment or distress. So we have to have that complaint before we can act on the PSPO.
Sorry, there was a...
Yeah, carry on.
My actual question was around on page 15. There's a point being made about grant funding applications, which have facilitated two projects, one for the 12 to 15 years old in Legacy Plus, and then for additional ASB hotspot patrols. I'm just wondering if you can give a bit of a description about what the Legacy Plus project is, but also how what's the duration of that grant in terms of the time that those projects or the actual additional resource will still be available to us in Winchester. Thank you.
So, as with all grant funds, they're all often short-lived. The Legacy Plus project is just for 12 months at the moment, and that came out of a lottery bid, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Antisocial Behaviour Task Force, and some internal funds from the City Council. And that is around early intervention, so there's quite a wide range of ages. So we look at the early intervention first, so those who are coming to partners' attention at the sort of teen ages, and then obviously it's working with them one-to-one and then in group work to try and get them tenant ready, because quite a lot of individuals are, when they get to their teen years, they can no longer live in their family home for various reasons. And what we want to do is make sure that if they're going out into the big wide world on their own, that they feel that they're tenant ready and they know how to manage their finances, live in a home successfully, etc. So at the moment, it's only for 12 months, but we will try and look for funding if it's successful. Can I just say about the Grip Patrol? So the Grip Patrol, the ASB patrols, that was additional patrols outside of the core business, because we've all got patrolling officers. This was between the hours of 4 and 7 p.m. when we were being notified that there was some begging going on in that period, and I think it was raised at this committee a while ago. So we got the grant funding for that from the Serious Violence Duty, Safer Streets. Unfortunately, the government's pulled the plug on that, and that's actually finishing in March of this year. So we're looking out to see what else is coming our way. But that was patrols that we paid for, commissioned through the bid rangers, and our own officers went out as well they will continue doing that between 5 and 7, but it will only be sort of once a fortnight.
Thank you, Sandra. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really good report, and it really highlights that it's clear that our small community safety team is working extremely hard alongside the police and other partners. So thank you for that. However, I did want to raise 2 points, and I kind of build on a little bit what Councillor Power was saying earlier. That concerned me for some time. The balance of focus between rural areas and the city centre. I mean, Chief Inspector, you did mention this in your introduction at the start, which was great, but there is very little in the report about this, and also the total absence of Whiteley in this report. That's missing as well. So first, on rural areas, the report shows the majority of the most complex community safety cases are actually coming from rural parts of the district. Out of the 93 cases discussed, 62 were from rural areas. So that is a very striking proportion, and it tells me that rural communities are dealing with significant and persistent problems. We also see 49 rural locations reported for antisocial behaviour through the council's online reporting system, and yet the patrol levels don't seem to reflect that demand. During the same period, the community safety officer carried out 11 rural patrols compared with 58 urban areas. Now, I don't want to build on any of these articles or anything. I don't want to besmirch the name of Winchester, but I do want to check whether we feel that rural communities are receiving a fair share of attention and visibility. So my second point, so that's the first point, and my second point was really about Whiteley. Whiteley, as we know, is the second largest retail area in the Winchester district. It's got huge footfall and a real, and obviously real risk of theft-related crime. But Whiteley doesn't appear in the report at all. Not in the data, not in the analysis, and not in the partnership activity. Meanwhile, the city centre is covered in great detail. So, including the compile operation, targeted patrols, banning orders, and enforcement outcomes. So there's a lot going on in the city centre, and then our second biggest area is not mentioned. I appreciate that work's important, but Whiteley is a major destination too, and it'd be helpful to understand whether it's being monitored and supported to the same extent. So can you provide a so can you provide an update now, and also going forward, and this is kind of building on Councillor Power's point, could we have a clearer area-based information, city centre, market towns, rural areas and Whiteley, so we can better understand where the demand is coming from? Thank you.
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but we mentioned at our last year that we were without an antisocial behaviour officer in the City Council. So we recruited to a very experienced officer who was a previous PCSO. She didn't start with us until September of this year. So she is actually getting out. So we've made that post an ASB patrol officer. So she's much more vis when she's out and about. And consequently, Becky is the strategic lead for ASB. So she will deal with all the internal stuff, the ASB case review, to enable Dawn to actually go out and be visible. So she works, she's only one person, but she works in partnership with our local police officers. You've got 2 community support officers who work in Whiteley. Dawn's been out with them on targeted operations, and she's also done the same in Bishop's Waltham. So we are trying to make sure that we are being equitable with our patrols. I do take on board what you're saying. But as a community safety partnership, we have to target our very small resources where the priority is. And if the priority happens to be city centre, then that's probably where we're going to have to focus for a period of time. In terms of the report, I'm really happy to break it down into the sort of rural urban split if the committee wishes us to do so in the future.
Thank you. I just wanted to add in on that as well, that of course Whiteley has its own centre management as well, and they sort of self-police with a small p, so they probably need less of our intervention, I would say. Is that right, Sandra?
Yes, absolutely, but we still work in partnership with their teams.
So from a policing perspective, we do still absolutely police Whiteley. Our neighbourhood team out of Bishop's Waltham, you've got a dedicated local bobby, Sharon Conway, is the officer for Whiteley. We've run a number of operations over the last year, and we also have the PCC down there introducing the UK PAC system, which is allowing shops to report crime into the system, which then easily gets to us. So there's a lot of work that we're doing. The figures that we've got here include Whiteley, include the rural areas, but I completely get your point that it would be probably beneficial to everybody if we split that to show what that looked like, which we can definitely do that going forward. Just on your first point around rural crime, will be a constant district priority for us going forward. There's a lot of work that we're doing in the background to try and support rural landowners, people that are living in the rural community, and just try and get that more visibility for those residents.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murphy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My questions have become follow-up questions because people have already asked a good chunk of them. But I think, first of all, taking Councillor Clear's point around the sort of reporting back following the reporting of crime, I think, it has been a fantastic change, and in the reporting, the point you highlighted about that the victims of crime now always get a report back. From previous discussions here on drug policy, we've been encouraging people to report things that they see, but obviously then they're not a victim of the crime, so they don't hear back. We absolutely want to encourage that behaviour. And I think, the point that's coming through here is that really request really about what you think you might be able to do in terms of reporting back on those. Well, we're not necessarily reporting back to those individuals, but in reporting back to those communities in some way on those ones that haven't been with a victim, and finding a mechanism, whether that's through councillors, parish councillors, or others. You basically any ideas as to how that could be done?
There's lots of ways that we can pass on that information. Please do follow us on social media. All our officers, our local bobbies will update on what is going on in the local area. We've got beat surgeries. That's an opportunity for people to actually come and speak to the officers. So please do try and share that with your constituents to say, attend on those days, speak to local officers. They'd be able to give you that information as to what's been going on in each area, and actually have that face-to-face contact.
Sandra?
Yeah, my team often arrange what we call street briefs. So we will go out into the community where there's been some incidents of community concern, and we set up a stand and we tell people we're coming out, and then we stay there for the day, and people come and talk to us and share what their concerns are, and we also can then feed back to them what we've done in terms of trying to resolve the issues that they're raising. So we can actually from April through to September, we normally have an antisocial behaviour summer campaign, and that's where we have a calendar of events with all our partners to try and increase the feelings of safety around the district. So we'll certainly think about that in terms of you said, we did feedback.
Just to add, Dawn is brilliant at telling ward councillors that she's holding these events as well. So we're also invited to go along and attend and liaise with our local communities too.
Thank you, and I think it would be great. I'm always reluctant because you give us a lot of information in this report to add things to it, but actually some comment on how much of that engagement is there is both really positive for us, but also it reminds all of us that you're doing that, and to raise things with you if we feel particular pockets of our communities want that feedback.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Contact me directly, but as always, I'm always asking for the support of our ward champions to encourage our communities to actually use 101 to report their concerns, because when we meet at tactical police meeting or even other partnership meetings, that will be recorded, and then we can share what intelligence we've got, and also we can then agree a sort of remedial pathway.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think certainly most of us are a broken record up to when it comes to talking to our people in our community to say report, because you can act on that. And then the second follow up is just on this FAT further action taken. I mean, you gave the examples. So you've got caution, the conditional caution, and then the charge. I suppose. The two of those are a sort of final step in the process, and one of those, the charging, obviously, is the start of a different legal process. So my question is there any way within this that you can include information that shows how that tracks out? Because we know from charge often to the case itself and things, it now runs into years. Many cases, and so we know your report currently is getting us to, you've taken a first step, but we've no feel really then as to how it has gone from there yet. Have you any thoughts on how we get comfortable with that, and again can get
Are you talking about in relation to when things go to court and then the results?
Yeah, so it's that rest of the process, because you've covered to the point of the action.
So from our perspective, we give the Crown Prosecution Service all the evidence. It then goes to court. It then is down to what happens at court as to what that final result is. I'll have to go away and have to think about that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you can, but it helps us, because obviously from the victim's perspective, it's a sort of end-to-end process, and they're less aware of where things fall at different stages. But thank you if you can think about that.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Two quick questions. One, Sandra, we were talking a minute ago about ways in which maybe we could add different things into the report. My ask would be, although it shows in many instances the figures around this quarter or this period versus last year's period, it left me wondering what the trend was over a number of years. And without looking through all the previous sort of reports, it would be tricky for me to work that out. And I just wondered whether it's possible to have, sort of graphically showing where this is going generally. Is this something that's an improving position or a worsening position? Because often from year to year, you get ups and downs, don't you, generally, which you sort of want to know where it's going. So that would be my ask for you to consider. And then on the rural crime aspect of things, one of the things when I was looking on page 37 at the part on the road safety mobile camera enforcement and community speed watch, Councillor Pett and I are the proud beneficiaries of the average speed cameras that run along the 272 and the A32. And many of our residents tell us and complain to us regularly about how they feel that just outside those areas, and I can, one is a pretty good stretch south of West Meon along the A32 where they open up, I believe is the phrase, particularly motorbikes, all the way down to Warmford and reach eye-watering speeds. And I wondered whether you have or could have a particular strategy to try and clamp down a bit on the leakage that causes, where people have obeyed the average speed zone and then think, oh, I've had enough of that, I need a bit of speed, and just keep them calm. Because it really, I mean, down the valley, the racket, let alone the danger caused by it, but the racket that you get from them revving down there is just out of this world. Thank you.
It's definitely something we can raise with our road policing unit and look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Power, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think you're reporting properly how much work you do in the rural areas. I'm looking at roads policing and RTCs as part of this report. I know in Alresford we've had at least 2 fatalities and 1 life-changing injury in the last few months. And again, this section of the report only focuses on what's happening in the city. And I think it gives a false impression to councillors. I don't want to make the report bigger, but I feel there must be slicker ways of reporting how much is being done on investigating those collisions, because they're an awful lot of work. And if people don't see that you are recognising how much that work is achieving and delivering, possibly in terms of changes to road layout, they feel you're not seeing them. Again, it's a rural area problem. And you need to big up what you're doing a bit more, I think. Thank you.
Noted. Yes. When you're brilliant to say it. And you are. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on from what Councillor Bolton was saying, actually, this time last year, I raised the average speed cameras on the A32, A272 and asked for some data on the efficacy of those cameras and the number of offences from them. And you followed up after the meeting with a note saying they're obviously very effective because there aren't many offences, but no detail on that at all. Given the PCC invested over £600,000 on those schemes, the local residents are somewhat sceptical that these schemes are working at all, and it would be really, really useful if we were able to go back and give some hard stats on the effect they're having, and particularly the number of offences that have been registered and the number of NIPs issued and so on. That's my first of two, if I may.
So on the back of that, you requested that we provide, or the district commander provide you data, and you should be receiving quarterly data through the DSU. So we've actually been circulating it from last year.
Not specific to those schemes at all.
Okay.
I can look at that.
Yes, please, or your successor will, hopefully. Yeah.
He's taking notes.
Okay, a more trivial quick question on that is, I noticed there's a 36% increase in mobile camera enforcement activity in July, August and September. Is there an obvious answer to that?
Not off the top of my head.
No, okay. Right, my second substantive point was moving on to Boomtown, and there's some considerable information in here on the particularly the drug offences at Boomtown. Again, working with Councillor Bolton, we've been following this for the last 3-4 years or more. Certainly we were very interested that the police took the Boomtown licence to review and then dropped their request 48 hours before the hearing. Because of that, there was nothing in the public domain on how the police were working with Boomtown to improve the efficacy of enforcement at the festival. We then had the coroner's report last summer, which was quite excoriating on the attitude of the festival to drug use. And similarly, being in our patch, as it were, we found it very hard to get any formal feedback on the measures that were being taken and the degree of reassurance, if any, we could give to our residents that drugs were being tackled more effectively at the festival. Can you go into a little more detail on that, please?
In relation to Boomtown, it is a force-led operation that happens to be in the Winchester district. So even though I'm the district commander, I don't have a large footprint within Boomtown. Something I'd probably take away and come back to you with some more information outside of this meeting, if that's okay. It's in appendix.
Okay, yes, please.
We have added some extra details in appendix 3, which I pulled for you. But there's a lot of work that we do in partnership with the festival, but probably not for discussion as part of this forum, but we can come back to you with some of that information.
Okay, I think certainly the two, I think I can speak for Councillor Bolton, that what we're really after is some personal reassurance from whoever is responsible within Hampshire Police, so that we can give the right vibes, for want of a better word, to our residents that yes, the right action is being taken, and yes, the problems are being better resolved.
Yes, I saw that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Laming.
Thank you. I'd like to emphasise what Councillor Petts just said on Boomtown, because we were quite concerned on licensing on that. But I'd like to go back to what Councillor Clear said about interaction with the parish councils. We used to have a lot of reports from the police. Now the request from all of my parish councils is that we have a bit of contact with the police. Can we look into that?
If you go onto the website, you can see who your local officers are. It's got their email, their telephone numbers. Please do make direct contact with those officers in relation to crime within your area. You can self-serve yourself within, just to get the crime data for some of your meetings if we are unable to attend. But I do encourage you to go online, find out who your local officer is and make contact with them.
Okay, we'll try that, but it has been asked quite a few times.
Councillor Batho.
Yes, thank you. Again, I've got a couple of questions, or a question and maybe just a point. In the section on stop domestic abuse, I note that the referrals to community-based services have almost doubled in the period from 24 to 25, from 242 to 483. Is there sort of any underlying reason for that? I know Winchester City Council have made strong efforts in terms of supporting domestic abuse and the qualifications around that. Is there anything further that we as a council can be doing to mitigate that situation? Thank you.
So I think we're largely proud of the fact that we've done a lot of education, awareness raising, been involved in lots of campaigns, national campaigns and local campaigns. And I think that has increased the number of self-referrals to our support services. So I would say, although, it's a terrible crime, it's a positive when people are feeling that they feel confident to come forward and ask for support and help.
Just to highlight Corinne's predecessor, John Turton, who has led some amazing work within the council, getting the council DAHA accredited, I can never remember what it's called, Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. So our officers within the housing team, actually throughout the council, are now far more attuned to recognising signs of domestic abuse and being able to signpost people to resources where they think it's necessary.
Sorry, and my other point was, in terms of the community safety partnership, I understand it's a sort of a statutory duty for you to report back against the crime and disorder sort of activity, and therefore potentially the report that you bring is a standard report that meets that criteria. I know community safety partnerships have run sort of not just here but sort of elsewhere. And I'm conscious that we seem to be sort of drip feeding you additional requirements to sort of widen the remit of the report to come back here. I'm just maybe suggesting to other members of this committee and the chair that, as we've done in other situations, we as a committee sit down and actually decide what additional requirements we have, and we use that sort of then to brief Inspector Kirby of sort of the next report to come back, so that we at least have a common understanding of what it is we're asking as a committee for to be reported back to this committee in this regard. Thank you.
So you're correct in saying that we bring a report to this Scrutiny Committee as part of the legislation that we adhere to. So our statutory duty, and within that, our duty is to report back on the work of the Community Safety Partnership. So that means that when we've done our annual strategic assessments of our audit of crime and disorder, we have to produce a delivery plan with priorities, and it's those priority actions that we report back to you as members. That's not to say that we can't enhance the report, but in terms of this report, we've highlighted the two: high harm crime, antisocial behaviour and public place. Yes, so what we're doing is adhering to the guidance, the government guidance, in terms of delivering on that stat duty.
Thank you. And to some extent, that's what I was trying to do, is, I suppose, speak to the members of this committee as much as it is to you in delivering that report, to caution us that actually you're here because of a statutory requirement to report against that. And what we can't do, I think, is actually keep on adding extra things to the sort of resort people to come back to this meeting. It is a dialogue. If there are things that we feel that should be added, we should have that as a requirement, and then for yourselves to come back and say whether it's achievable or not, because I wouldn't like people to go away from this meeting, as they have done in the past, with expectations about what's going to come to subsequent meetings, only to then be disappointed because the resource isn't there or the data isn't there. Because I know, having been to the Road Safety Summit yesterday and was talking again about the questions I had about bringing some of the speed and sort of aspects in this report, that sometimes the data isn't there or it's not available to your organisations in a format that would actually make it sensible to us. So I just want to make that sort of statement so that we have an understanding and we're open about what can be done, and make that as a dialogue and a sort of a coordinated sort of request.
Thank you, Councillor Matho. Councillor Bolton, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, that was a call to action. So could I ask you to make that a decision as to what we're going to do in terms of the committee? Because I'm concerned that what we do is every time this sort of committee reviews the CSP, is that we actually start adding extra things to it, and I think we need to do that in a coordinated way and make sure that it is actually an understood requirement. Because, as I say, I'm just concerned that we would then overload the sort of organisations that are coming back to report back to us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the comments this evening I've taken note of about adding in the wrong crime in relation to animals, adding a split between city centre, market towns, etc., and the Boomtown drug taking strategy, come back with reassurances. That's the three key points I've got. It's not an exhaustive list, and it's something that the portfolio holder can look at alongside Sandra, and as will be Inspector Kirby. I'm not sure it requires a separate meeting, and of course we always have the opportunity to feed into Councillor Becker as the portfolio holder if we do require specific things. So I think that's probably our best format, rather than us require a separate meeting to discuss.
Yeah, I was going to add part of the recommendations for tonight are to provide feedback to me. So I've noted it. I will, when we come to set the strategic assessment plan for the community safety partnership, we'll take into account what's being raised tonight. And I think in terms of the data, actually what you're asking for is not necessarily additional data, but a breakdown of the data that we already have between the city centre and the rural area, potentially market towns as well, which we can provide.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to it, that trending that I was asking about, I think is quite an important thing, because I think we all need to know that everything's going in the right direction, or not, as the case may be. But to the point of Boomtown that Councillor Pett raised, I totally agree with everything he had to say there. Just one thing that I would ask you to give some thought to as well when you're reviewing that and coming back to us. The claim that the 33% or more increase in drugs detection and all that sort of thing is because of enhanced detection and policing. I would ask for some evidence to demonstrate that, because there's been quite a growth in the number of attendees at Boomtown and the associated drugs with that. And there needs to be some sort of way of rationalising that, so that we know what is down to growth in attendance and what is down to changes in policing or detection and that sort of thing. I think that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
I think that could come as part of the reassurances afterwards, but yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just from me briefly before we finish and allow you to go home for your last day. So on here, the robbery, so that's the sort of violent robberies, isn't it? Is up 21, but the actual shoplifting type offences is down 46. Has there been a reclassification at all of the way they're reported? Is that so? Technically, there's only 25 difference.
Should get used to this when I press the button.
You don't have to worry.
So in relation to the robbery, there was a change in classification. So a lot of those would have been shopliftings previously. That, I mean, it shows a 95% increase, which as a percentage looks large. The numbers don't show. The numbers itself is an increase of 20, but that's a lot of those is the change in classification. So we haven't had an increase in violent robberies as you would see. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that was my question on that part. And again, so while the trending's useful, things change every year. The way you look at things, the way you classify things. So it's useful, but it's only indicative, isn't it? And the final thing I wanted to say is, because shoplifting has been so prolific over the past few years, if somebody sees, for example, someone stealing something in Tesco, is our best bet to call the police, go find security, take photos? As guidance to the public, what would you recommend?
Safety first, definitely. If there is security within the store, I would suggest that they contact security. They can then help, and then if necessary, then call us.
Thank you. And thank you so much. And I'm going to miss you. And thank you as well, Sandra, for all the work that you do and for keeping us safe. And we look forward to seeing your capable hands look after us going forwards. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So we're welcoming Julie and Sarah to the table with us. We're going to talk about the planning enforcement piece. And I understand, Mr. Tate, you wanted to speak on this item. So I will ask Councillor Wallace to introduce, and then we'll come to you. So the recommendation is that the Scrutiny Committee notes the recommendations from the Task and Finish group. And I understand, Councillor Wallace, you're going to give us a brief. This is what was different from last time, so now we should accept it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as the councillor who chaired the Planning Enforcement Task and Finish group, I'd like to briefly introduce this item and highlight the key points from our work. The group was set up to take a focused look at how the planning enforcement services are operating following the adoption of the updated enforcement plan last year. We held two sessions, one concentrating on how cases are assessed, prioritised and monitored, and another concentrating on communication, transparency and managing public expectations. A few themes came through very strongly. Firstly, communication remains the issue most frequently raised by councillors and parish councillors. While the service cannot always share detailed information, particularly where doing so could undermine an investigation, there is a clear desire for more consistent and clearer updates at key stages and for better explanations when the council decides that no further action is possible. Second, the group felt that there is scope to celebrate and share successful enforcement outcomes more visibly. This would help counter the perception that cases simply sit on the list without progress and would give the public a clearer sense of the work being carried out. Third, we discussed opportunities for practical improvements, including the development of a formal drone policy for difficult or unsafe sites, more use of temporary stop notices where appropriate, and closer alignment with the council's digital transformation work so the enforcement team can benefit from more modern systems. Finally, we recognise the challenge of long-standing historic cases and current recruitment pressures. The group accepts that these are real constraints and supports the service in continuing to use the new triage system to deal with lower priority cases more efficiently. The full recommendations are set out in the report, and they are all aimed at strengthening communication, improving transparency, and making better use of the tools available to us. I will be interested to hear the committee's views and whether there are any points members would like to see emphasised as this work progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Mr. Tate, would you like to come to speak with us for 3 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. As a member of the public, I take a great interest in enforcement issues within the city. On the 11th of May 2021, I took a picture of a premises in the High Street in Winchester in the conservation area. I emailed that to the enforcement team, pointing out that without planning permission, the top two windows have been removed, signage had been installed, and they put bifold doors. None of that with planning permission. I did get an acknowledgement from the enforcement team. That's back in 2021. I had calls. I'm doing some work on signage in the High Street. So I was talking to the head of historic environment, and I said to the excellent Mr. Eyre, you're mentioning this premises here, 20 metres up the road, and I can say what the premises is. It's all on in the public domain, 148 the High Street. And I said to Mr. Eyre, look at that. It's a travesty. It's a terrible, it's absolutely awful. And Mr. Eyre said, thank you, Ian. We have acted upon that in January 2025, only just within the 4 years. Only just within the 4 years, or outside of 4 years, you wouldn't be able to pursue it. They gave the premises 18 months. A week ago, I said to Mr. Ebb, what's happening? And actually just 3 days ago, they started doing the work. As a member of the public who probably instigates more enforcement actions within the city centre than possibly any other individual, and possibly more than any other person put by, I get one brief, the public get one brief mention. Is it easy for the public to report and track enforcement matters? It's very easy to report them. It's virtually impossible to track them. And I've looked at that every single day for the last 5 years thinking, what an abomination. And yeah, okay, it's now been done. But as a member of the public who is absolutely passionate about what's happening in Winchester, possibly more than a number of people here, and I look at the detail, I looked at an air conditioning unit in Parchment Street today, and that will be an enforcement action. No planning permission, in a very prominent position. So it's great that you talk to each other. It's great that you talk to the parish, but there are some individuals and other organisations like the City of Winchester Trust who are intentionally interested, and we get no mention at all. Yeah, I think I probably do more than most people to try and make sure that Winchester, that the worst offences are dealt with. And I feel sort of slightly alienated from this process, and it's only having a good working relationship with the historic environment that I'm updated. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel your passion.
Go and look at it. Actually, it's improving.
So if we come to questions shortly, perhaps we could ask how the public can access information, or how we could perhaps make that more accessible. You will never know. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for coming along this evening. So coming on to questions, who's got any questions on this piece? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. One of the main things I thought may have been tackled within this was with regard to KPIs and how we measure the performance within the enforcement unit, what targets we set and what the results are over time. But although it was in the initial document, it then has never appeared in the final report. And I wondered what had happened there and why we don't really have any KPIs as a recommendation. And then simply in reading that, I wondered what was the action plan for addressing the staffing issues that have been highlighted. So what are we doing about it, basically? Thank you.
Councillor Wallace, firstly to you on KPIs, please.
Yeah, I on the KPI ones, I went in there with exactly the same thinking, that we want some nice KPIs that we can track and monitor. And we talked through a few examples, and it became abundantly clear that that is not going to be possible. Every planning enforcement case is different, and I'm sure the officers will be able to put it more eloquently than me, but we talked through a few examples, and almost every single planning enforcement case is different, and any KPIs that certainly we could come up with during the meeting were going to be, or that we talked about, were going to be next to useless, because it wasn't it wouldn't fairly capture the current status. So we did talk about it, but perhaps the officers would like to add further.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Walsh. You've captured that very well. It's very difficult to measure what is a meaningful KPI in an enforcement case. There are, in the local enforcement plan that we adopted last year, some more localised measures around acknowledgement, the time we would like to get out and do a site visit, and we can measure those. But actually, you know, I think a different question would be, what does success look like? And it's outcome based, because a lot of work that the team do are very much in negotiations, trying to reach localised settlements rather than taking sort of action. And that is always a last resort, and that's a national position in terms of taking enforcement action. So it's a really tricky one. It's something I've thought about I've got a bit of a sore, thought about for a number of years about, you know, what's a meaningful measure of performance. And it's really, you know, if it was easy, I think we would like to sort of put some measure in, but it isn't easy. It's really tricky to say what does success look like. You know, as Ian Tate said, you know, we're good at acknowledging cases and doing site visits, but actually the time between those turnovers of action, getting back to an applicant or, you know, the homeowner or whoever, the landowner, whoever's sort of alleged to have undertaken a breach, we have to sort of verify that, and there are various steps, and it's impossible, I think, to put a meaningful KPI to that. So there are more localised ones, but I think the question I probably would ask in your shoes is, what does success look like? It's outcome based, isn't it? And they are quite hard to measure as well. They're qualitative data.
I recall us looking at this when I was portfolio officer, and I completely concur. There is no good way to measure this, because what good looks like depends on which side of the fence you're on, and success could be that we successfully upheld an appeal. It could be that they submitted a planning application, actually the planning team then approved it or rejected it. It could be that we took enforcement action and that we were successful and they had to reverse it back to how it was originally. So there's no, and all of those take a completely different amount of time. So if you're looking at how many close, that doesn't mean they were successful. It's just a really hard one to get your head around.
And one of the things I say, Chair, is our team just don't like closing cases down. They like to go, you know, they really want to work through and see if they can come to a solution. You know, it'd be easy, wouldn't it, just to close cases down? How many have you done this month? Oh, we've closed all of them. You know, we're churning through. But actually, that isn't outcome based. That's not solution focused. And I think that's very much where the team are sitting at the moment. We're sort of working with them to try and look at where we should put our resources and where that's best placed to tackle what we call the most harmful breaches. But there's always that balancing act to be had.
Oh yes, the police about recruitment.
Okay, if I take that comment, recruitment is challenging in planning as a whole, which I'm sure you're fully aware of. It is probably the most challenging in planning enforcement because it's where most of the conflict lies. So what we have done is we were fortunate to get some additional funding last year from the council, and we were seeking to try and recruit short-term contracts for planning enforcement officers. That didn't happen. There were no suitable candidates. So we've taken some additional contractor staff that have experience that can work on some of our backlog. We have unfortunately lost another planning enforcement officer, but we were quite quick to out recruitment. And I think in this area, it's about growing your own and bringing in sort of young staff and younger members of staff and helping develop them in the way that Winchester City Council wants their enforcement officers to do. So being proactive and working effectively. So we'll always have a mind to recruitment, and it is difficult and there's no easy answer to that.
Thank you. Councillor Paul?
I think that Mrs. Armstrong's not necessarily blowing her own trumpet here, because since she's come into the team, it's really strengthened the work they've been doing enormously. I'd just like to give her credit for that, because she's on top of every case as far as I can see.
Fabulous, thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, I think on the KPIs, yeah, that was the way the discussion. The extra complication, of course, was the change to the local, the enforcement plan and the year and the change of approach. And I think that meant we were also dealing with sort of legacy and new, which added to the challenge. I think definitely it felt like it was worth, in a sense, carrying on, trying to come up with measures. I think that came through. You certainly don't want to introduce perverse incentives to give up early to show a closed one, but some way that you can communicate out, just in a slightly more numeric way, the challenge to parish councillors and councillors, that how the extra work that's being done. And it's almost, as you see the benefits of the new approach, some way of expressing that would be helpful, even if we couldn't solve it in the discussion, because of the interaction with the legacy.
Was there a question, Councillor Murphy?
So do you accept the challenge? I mean, effectively, that what was identified is that we do, and it's come out of the recommendations, that the communication to parish councillors is particularly important. Do you, effectively, are you willing to take on the challenge that, as you have, said, to celebrate the success as a way of measuring? Because even if it's not accepting the challenge, a way that people can track your progress.
Yeah, we do take on that challenge. But what I would say is, in my view, you have an excellent enforcement team and it's well managed, and they're always looking to see how they can do things better. And more recently, we've had an issue, but they're going out to find out what other councils do, to see whether, when there is some sort of success put out in LinkedIn, they're making contact to see why, how's that occurred. And that's just literally what they're doing now. So there is that reflection. So I can give you some comfort around that. The digitalisation that we've spoken about, that is something that we're looking at to see how that can help communication. So that what we can't do is spend a lot of investigative resource, take it away from that to just dedicate to communication. But if we can make communication easier through digitalisation, that's probably our goal. And so we're focused on that as well. And yes, we are in that process of trying to do continuous improvement, because it's a very challenging area. But as Mrs. Pinnock suggested, Our officers like to have an outcome and have success, whatever that might mean, but they do like to see closure, but probably in a positive way through negotiation or through the submission of a planning application. So yes, we do take on that challenge.
Thank you. Councillor Clear, please.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask, because there's only 2 meetings, can you outline the factors as to why the group did not progress beyond the 2nd meeting? And may I ask, will the group reconvene, or do you feel all was covered and will now be formally closed?
I think I can answer that. It was just a task and finish group. It was only ever supposed to be looking at the immediate, let's do a deep dive, let's dig behind it, let's come up with some recommendations. It was only ever supposed to be that. Councillor Wallace, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a really important area for all of us and for our residents. So we made, you know, it was a really useful couple of meetings where we did deep dive into it. But have we solved it in a way that's going to keep all our residents happy forever and a day? I don't think so. There's a lot of it's a challenging area, and I think really, like I said, like you said, Chair, I think our aim is to come up with recommendations. It's not to do the work. We're a task and finish group, so our aim is to come up with recommendations going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Clear. Councillor Bathurst.
Thank you, Chair. I actually wasn't on the task and finish group, but I'm just looking at some of the information. And I think part of the issue is actually one of communication and actually being aware of the progress of the cases. And in the section, it says that the case updates at key investigation stages, e.g. remedy underway, notice served. I'm just wondering if there are standard stages that the case might go through, whether a couple of additional columns in the report that comes out to councillors and to the parish council, which actually indicates the stage that it's at and a comment against that, because what we only see is the actual information about the initial report, and then it sits there. And there might be lots of work happening, as you quite rightly say, but as far as we're concerned, we can't see that because there's no further information or no progress being stated. So I'm just wondering, you know, I can understand obviously in terms of KPIs where, you know, because they are different, you can't standardize what that KPI might be. But nonetheless, if there are standard stages that you're going through, then those could be put in and a comment against each of that, you know, each stage as to what the actual action at that point is being taken. It just helps with, you know, a bit of an update as the progress of the case is taking. Thank you.
I think, Chair, with your permission, I mean, this is something we've gone around many years, and actually it's quite a tricky task to update those lists monthly to provide the sort of data that you're asking for. So the data that we pull off at the moment is automated, and it enables us to do that monthly and send out those lists of open, closed, and is there a third one? A new, yeah, I thought there were 3. If we have to intervene each month before there and update the stages, that takes an officer away from actually doing activity on a particular case. And I understand your point about could we standardise those. I think each case is so unique and different that would be very difficult to do. And my view would be that actually that wouldn't be any more meaningful than having you know, the lists as they are at the moment, and it's something we've looked at in the past and shied away from. But I do accept that the communication is key, but there's also an element of, and this is not to be with members. Obviously, you can see that data, but actually, that, you know, these are alleged breaches of planning control, and until there's an enforcement notice served, there's not an action, and it's not a criminal offence. So we do need to be careful with how we share that data and what is on the list and how those lists go out. So there's, you know, they're carefully measured in terms of the information that's put on them for that reason. And I think that would be a different work stream and would take officers away from the work if we were to do that.
Thank you.
I
Briefly,
think,
because
yes, I appreciate it. But I think this question has actually got overlays with our previous conversation in terms of the community safety partnership and our request of additional data from that, because I think what we're seeing here is that organisations have data which serves their needs internally to manage processes, and what we're asking for in terms of visibility is actually the interpretation of that data or additional data to make it actually useful for doing what we're doing, which is a scrutiny function. And I think that is the gap between what your resource is to do that day-to-day actually doing the job and what then is required from the organisation to enable it to actually be able to scrutinise has to be accepted, and there has to be some way of actually finding that resource. And that's why I was in the last meeting section actually cautioning not asking for too much, because you're actually making exactly the point that I was trying to make in terms of the police and other agencies coming to us previously, is that they will have to find that resource. Okay, so I think
Councillor Batho, I think we've got the point. Councillor Wallace is just going to respond on this one.
Yeah, so obviously today our aim is to come up with recommendations that we put into the cabinet member. The first of those recommendations I explained is on communication, because that is the most important element that we identified. Do you think we have a recommendation 1 there? It says is on improving communication. Are there any changes you're suggesting to that recommendation, or do we want to make it more fulsome? Because we're not trying to solve the problem today, we're trying to put together some recommendations to go to the cabinet member.
Agreed. This is recommendations, and also, although you've repeated it, Councillor Batho, and I completely take your point here, there is only a finite amount of information that the team can give us on each case, and I would much prefer that the officers were working on the cases within our communities and spending time to satisfy our need for data would be my preference. Although we would all like more regular updates and more information, particularly in our wards, that we can share. So I'm not really comfortable with that as a recommendation, but I don't know what the committee feel. On to Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I get on my question, I'll just echo what Julie said. Of course, the whole enforcement thing is characterised by the fact that it starts with an allegation, and until something is proved, it is no more than an allegation. But going back to the report, yes, we've got some recommendations here. Recommendations by themselves don't actually achieve anything. Could I ask that we get the team to come back to us in 6 months' time with the briefest of progress reports against each of those recommendations? Not a great tome, simply one side of A4 max probably, but just so that we have some confidence that they're not just recommendations, that something's been achieved from all of this.
I think that could be really useful. Councillor Porter, your thoughts on that?
I understand what's been asked for. I hope we can make some real progress on some of those. I think that the digitalisation programme may not have been provide what you're asking for by that stage, but it's certainly part of the conversation. I just want to say we've got a really hard-working, resilient team working on enforcement. It really isn't an easy task at all. And some work has already gone on since these meetings, and it's been an opportunity to distill today some of that work that's already gone on. So yes, I think it would be appropriate to come back in 6 months' time. But actually there is a recommendation at the end, which is to give a briefing at the new instigation of any new councillors in April, May. And it will be an opportunity to brief new councillors as well as to update older, more experienced councillors.
Old
Not
councillors.
old. More experienced councillors.
Thank you, councillor Porter. Councillor Langman, please.
Right here. We hear a lot about resources, and I sympathise with the department quite a lot. And I would like to see us concentrating on things, and with the problems we have with the number of appeals that go in, I feel sure that we should be actually asking for costs on appeals far more. We had an instance the other day where we had an appeal that lasted all day, and that took officers' time. We've had another one where that was a big, complicated one where officers spent many, many hours on it. And I'd like to see us trying to put a bit more action into discouraging it, because we're taking a stronger line.
Tim, I think it's a really good point you raise about trying to recover our costs when that's reasonable, but there is national legislation in terms of appeals, and people do have a right to bring an appeal, and you can only claim costs against the other party if they've behaved unreasonably. And actually, you know, the fact that they've done the work without the benefit of planning permission isn't the bit that's deemed to be unreasonable. It's about how they conduct themselves in the appeal. So we will, when we can, look to recover costs and make cost claims in appeals. But there is a precedent that, you know, that should only be if they behave, or indeed people make claims against us if we are deemed to behave unreasonably. So there's a threshold there, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the ones I've been referring to.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? No, I would like any debate on this. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand the need for data, and I understand the reservations that officers have about giving us this data. And I'm looking for a happy medium between resource constraints, legitimacy of making that information public, and parish councils do count as the public, as do we. And Simon Howson can give a background to this. There is a risk that providing more data lets the tail wag the dog, and I think we don't want resource spent on providing data, but we do need to have enough data to be able to scrutinise the way in which this council spends their money. And I think that should be the focus of the data that is put in the public domain, without prejudicing any further case. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just also thank the Task and Finish group for the time already invested, and to recognise the officers who supported them throughout. But I'd also like to agree that perhaps a brief report is brought back and at an appropriate stage, and would give us the reassurance that the momentum we've built here is being carried through. So if we could do that, that would be fine. Thank you so much.
Councillor Porter.
I just want to say really, or perhaps finish the debate and then I'll answer back at the end of that. I think maybe
any further debate, Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely agree with what Councillor Porter's just said, and what Councillor Batho was referring to earlier. I do feel that there has to. What did I say? Oh, I meant that. I meant Power. Sorry. Do apologise, Councillor Power. And I do understand the need, as you quite rightly characterised it, as getting the balance right. I understand that. But as you say, we do need to. If we don't measure things, they don't happen in the way that you want them to. And so there has got to be some way of getting a realistic measure around performance. I wonder whether you feel that with the advent of a new IT system that you've referred to a couple of times, Councillor Porter, that you feel that there may be within the scope of designing a new system that could be borne in mind, the need for measuring some of the performance, and that could be part of the outcome from the from a new technology implementation. Thank you.
Councillor Buffo.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, like to thank the team sort of in terms of the information, as though I wasn't on the committee. I'm sure that there was a lot of valuable exchange taking place between the officers and councillors. I suppose I just want to reflect again on the comments I've made previously in both this and the previous presentation. I think we have to be careful that we look inwards and don't understand what our customers, and those might be individual sort of residents or parish councils, are looking for from us as a council, because we have, as a council, a sort of one of our objectives is to listen and to sort of improve the way that we communicate, and I think there is, from our point of view, going to be a cost for doing that. And what we need to make sure is that we understand what that cost is, but also say what actually the requirement is, and then we put some form of cost to that so that we can actually endeavour to achieve those objectives. Because we need to make sure that we are interpreting the data that we have. And I think the trouble is that we've got data, we don't necessarily have information. And I think what we're looking for is a way to interpret that data that we have in our internal systems and provide information, both to this committee in terms of our scrutiny, but also to our residents and to our parish councils, so that they have a better understanding of how this council is performing, and that they can have a better or a more guaranteed or more sort of secure understanding that we are achieving our objectives. Okay, so thank you. That's what I feel, is that we need to make sure that we are in a position to respond and listen to our residents and parish councils and be able to provide that information. Thank you.
Do you think it would be useful if we had an annual update at scrutiny with, this is how many cases have gone to court that we've won, this is how many have gone to court that we've lost, this is how many we consider the council have taken enforcement action and been successful in that? Would that be something useful?
Chairman, I appreciate your debate, but we do report those national measurable performance indicators quarterly. And nationally, appeal success is one of the measures that the government measure as well. So they are. So I'm going to say it's the soft stuff. It's the stuff where you don't get to those actions, I think, which is where we're talking about, isn't it? And that's much trickier to provide the data on, in that measurable. The data be the information that Councillor Baffo said. Well, I've got the mic. If I could say, you talked about coming back with a paper. I think 6 months is going to be a little bit tight for us, if I'm honest, and I think we would just probably need a little bit longer than that to, take these measures forward, build on the work that we've already done within the team, including that recruitment and retention that we're looking at, and the work we're doing on some of the legacy cases at the moment with the funding that we've had. And just to say on digitalisation, we are working, and it's a corporate project, to introduce a customer relation management tool. We're looking at digitalisation of the team, and some of those things just, whilst we'd like them to go quicker, that there are processes and procurement and investment in those products to make them work how we need them to. So I just think we need a little bit more time. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I think it's a useful point, but I'd just like to build in a little bit more time so we come back to something meaningful. Otherwise, we're going to come back in, reporting in 5 months for 6 months committee, and there won't be that much change, I don't think. But it will grow as we move forward.
Councillor Porter.
I was going to talk about one of the things that was asked even at the meetings was a comparison of different other organisations, different other councils. It's incredibly difficult to even produce that because it's not publicly available information, and some work was done on that, and we are not at the bottom and we're not at the top in the comparisons that we made. But it's still very difficult to exactly quote the sort of straight KPIs that were being asked for. And I know that you understand completely about this. I think it's I mean, Mrs. Spirit might like to comment on that, but I was asking for more information too. There's just no way of getting it, which is incredibly hard. I don't know if you want to comment about that, the comparisons.
Yeah, I mean, we've got it in the paper, haven't we, in Appendix 2, and we had to be careful because the data from our peer councils isn't in the public realm either. So we didn't want a result of this to show others sort of efficiencies or whatever. But yeah, it's really difficult. It's hard to, are we comparing apples with apples as well? In terms of our geography, Winchester's district, a large sort of urban and rural council, we've got part of the national park in our geography as well. In terms of the benchmarking, we particularly picked out, and this was something we discussed at the task and finish group, is who should we compare against? What does that look like? Because I don't want to name any other councils, but comparing us to another council in Hampshire wouldn't probably be very meaningful. So it was looking at that geography, the relationship of the team and the type of issues that they have, which we pulled out here. And the staffing and the level of staffing and who does that enforcement work in different councils is just managed very differently. So, are there things we can learn and take away? Yes, always. And our enforcement team leader networks across not just Hampshire, but with other fellow enforcement managers and staff, so as we can understand where we sit within that.
Thank you. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I understand what people are saying, that 6 months isn't very long, but I was asking for a report against progress against each of those recommendations. There may be no progress, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But unless we maintain some momentum, then there's a real risk that the ball is dropped and 2 years' time, all of these recommendations are forgotten. So I would go back to my earlier ask, which was for, in 6 months' time, a very short indication of progress against each of the recommendations. Thank you.
I've made a note of that for the portfolio holders' consideration, for the consideration of the team. But noted that you think 6 months is a bit tight and you'd prefer a little bit longer before you report back. Absolutely. But I've noted the recommendation. Okay, so thank you again to the Task and Finish Group. Thank you to the officers for the work you've put into this. And for accepting the challenge of taking on these recommendations. Thank you for all that you do in enforcement. It is often a thankless task. You can't please anyone. So I appreciate you. Thank you. Just to summarise the enforcement part that we're going back with, the enforcement suggestion is literally that they come back and report to us that we've noted that the part about coming back in a year and the recommendation that they consider 6 months. Councillor Porter.
I'd just like to say, really, I will take the points you've raised on board and undertake the post-election briefing that you're asking about. I think it's important that we do keep people up to date with what's going on. I appreciate what the officers have said about the progress that we may make in a short period of time, but we are determined to keep making progress on this whole area. It is a power, not a duty, to do enforcement. So therefore it is something that we have to decide how much money we put into this and how we approach each individual case. And I think that's the strength of the system, that our team have got that experience that they can tackle each sort of different case, and they're very different. They are hugely different. The technology has got an opportunity if we can manage to inform people better. But also I'm very conscious that we've been discussing the very sensitive information about each of these, and going back to the point we've made, we have to be careful not to impart too much information to the public such that it puts both the officers, the person that has perhaps complained, the person that is supposed to be the perpetrator, and everybody else in difficulty. I do urge, if a councillor has a particular issue they want to talk about, they inform me as well, because then at least we may be able to distill something to them about it. As I say, I think we've been very strengthened by Sarah coming into this and taking a real range of issues on board with the team. That's made a very different picture. And I just would seek from the team here, the councillors here, that understanding that every single one is different, and you can't just write down a quick few words and that solves the problem for everybody. But we have also been drawing up a drone policy. I just wanted to mention that is some progress. I was tempted to leave that, so we've got it for a few months' time. But we are drawing up a drone policy, and it's specifically to use the drone footage provided by residents. And we already use police footage, but to use footage provided by residents to understandably and make sure that it's current in context and must not be misleading. So that's an example of how it sounds easy to use drone footage, but it isn't easy. So I think that shows some of the complexity of it and the care with which the team have to work.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Thank you. You are free to enjoy your evening. Thank you. We're going to come on to item 8, Q3 Finance and Performance Monitoring, pages 59 to 116. I'm not going to break this down into sections due to the time. We've been going for nearly 2 hours. So the recommendation is that the Scrutiny Committee raises with the Deputy Leader or relevant Cabinet Member any issues arising from the information in this report, Ref Cab 3537, which is being presented to Cabinet on the 12th of March, and considers whether there are any items of significance to resolve or to be drawn to the attention of Cabinet. So we have Liz Keys here at the table. I spotted you even though you were at the end, which is rare. We have Simon Howson here as well. So thank you for being with us. Councillor Cutler, I believe you're going to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. The third quarterly performance report 25-26 financial year, as usual, focuses on the progress and achievements delivering the priorities of the council plan. So this report covers 1st of October to the 31st of December, and there has been one sort of additional update since the previous quarterly report, and that is to include the programme highlight report for the local government reorganisation. It's been included in the efficient and effective council plan section of the report. There are no other changes to the format of the report, and you well know that format now, so I won't go through the details of it. Some of the highlights of the report you may wish, may wish to note are the 4 food waste collection rounds introduced during that quarter, with the further rollout on track. In this quarter, Winchester Sport and Leisure Park announced as the winner of the Regional Public Club Centre of the Year for the Southern Region at the 2025 UK Active Awards. Contracts being exchanged for the acquisition 46 S106 units in Kings Barton, and consultation undertaken with key stakeholders as stage 1 of the community governance review for the unparished area of Winchester. So there's a range of things that are there in the report, but as you've pointed out, Chair, we have several officers here who are probably more capable than me of answering most of the questions.
So, any questions? Councillor Wally.
Thank you, Chair. I've got covering the whole thing, so I've got 3 questions, so I'll just put them all out there. First one was on the climate and corporate carbon neutralities of the council estate. The report highlights that the anticipated carbon savings from decarbonising key corporate buildings, the Guildhall, city offices and so on, are now at risk, and that further opportunities need to be identified to stay on track. This is obviously a big issue given the 2030 commitment. A clearer mitigation plan would be welcome, so I'd like some comments on that. Second one was around the housing retrofit programme. my normal questions really. Q3 does show accelerated progress, and I was really pleased to hear about that at full council the other day. However, the programme does remain amber with targets adjusted due to the delays. Be helpful to understand whether this revised trajectory still keeps us on track for our EPC commitments by 2030. And the third question is on the HRA, on the financial pressures on the HRA. The HRA is now forecasting a £500,000 deficit driven by around £1 million of additional void repair costs, extra reactive spending linked to damp, mould and other issues, higher depreciation charges and reduced rental income. While improved interest income helps, these underlying pressures appear structural, not one-offs, and it would be useful to know how sustainable this position looks heading into the next year, into 2026, 27. So 3 questions there. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first one was more a statement that we need a better process to mitigate that, rather than saying, you know, there isn't one at the moment. This report's on the quarter 3 report. As you said, the figures in terms of the retrofit were reported to council, 511 improvements for this quarter and 340 homes improved. I take it that as I understand it, that does keep us on track to the EPC level in 2030, but I'm sure Simon Hendy can add to that. And similarly with the HRA account, I mean, the quarterly figures were taken into the third quarter figures would have been taken into account in the budget, because everything, that financial report here is on both sides, general fund and with the HRA, would have all been taken into account in our budget process last week. So it's all included there, but Simon may want to add to those comments.
If I may, Chair, there was the comments on the Guildhall, and if you remember, the council voted a significant sum of money for refurbishment and repair work in the Guildhall, and part of that work will be looking at improved management systems for heating and lighting in this building, which will have an impact on the carbon that the building generates. So it's very difficult to establish a clear business case to justify the investment in some of the measures which would have significant impact reducing carbon, but those will. On the HRA, Councillor Cutler's mentioned, and I hope at the end of quarter 4 I'll be able to cheer up Councillor Wallace and say that actually we've exceeded the target's number of properties, if we haven't even exceeded the number of measures, because you'll be aware that we've been delayed in some of the works that we've been able to do because of decisions by DESNES and the SHDF funding. So although we'll be doing, hopefully, we're predicting to be able to deliver more properties receiving works, we may not have done the number of measures that we predicted before. And lastly, on the HRA, you'll see that there's some provisions in the current year that are being made, budget provisions at the moment, which we are whittling away at, related to retrofit work that needs to be remedied where work wasn't done sufficient quality before, and that's reducing. We hope we can reduce that before year end, and that would actually impact on the predicted overspend that exists at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. So page 66 on the nutrient mitigation solution, it enables me to come back to try and ask the question I was asking Councillor Porter at council last week, which is with regard to not so much colourful language, with regards to Northington Road and the Goodlands that are given here as the 2 HRA nutrient solution mitigation projects. What I was trying to understand is whether pre the instigation of the solution, are the outpourings of the said treatment plant measured, you know, and then the solution put in place, and then the new outpourings that are considerably cleaner and of less nitrate and phosphates, are they measured, or is it that there is an algorithm applied to this rather than any measurements taking place? That was what I was trying to understand, if there's actually chemical analysis carried out. Thank you.
That seemed to be looking at you, Simon.
It's the latter. We publish the results on that on the council's website on a regular basis. That's my understanding. It's that's my understanding. It's not just a algorithm, as you say. It's we do regular monitoring all the sites, so even those that haven't been receipt of works.
So actually, my question at council was along those lines, which you weren't able to answer, of course, but you were in attendance. That I was asking whether the 15 other sites within the Itchin catchment area that have not been upgraded yet, whether we know precisely what we are issuing into the Itchin catchment area from those, because we measure them already. And you think that's the case?
I don't think it, in terms of, because this refers to the credits cannot be calculated without knowing what position was before and what position is afterwards. Otherwise, the credits aren't generated.
That was my understanding.
But in terms of, as I understand it, and Councillor Porter may be able to add to it, all the plants have to be monitored to be within the Environment Agency's limits anyway. If we can improve on, part of the national problem is that water treatment plants have limits applied to them, varying limits applied to them by the Environment Agency that are not stringent enough, quite frankly. But they are legal requirements, and so we will be measuring those plants, and we can also then assess those that can be upgraded to generate the credits.
So just to come back on that, just to say,
Yeah, I've just looked on the website. So we, for the sites where work's taking place, we publish the results for nitrogen and phosphate month by month. So I'm just looking at 2026 figures for Northington Road, Goodens and Itchen View. And in 25, it would have been just Northington and Goodens because those are the only two plants that were done. I think special maintenance do monitor all the other sites as well. I have to confirm that, I'm sure they do, but we don't publish that information.
Councillor Porter wants to speak. Councillor Power's got a hand up and Councillor Bolton also wants to come back. So I'm going to go to Councillor Porter quickly first and then come to you, Councillor Bolton.
I hadn't quite sussed out what you were trying to ask, but I now see what you're trying to say. I think it predates Mr. Hendy, but I remember sitting at Cabinet with the list of the full number of sites, and they had all been assessed for the most effective, the ones that we could generate the nitrates and phosphates with most effectively, and the ones that effectively had the greatest potential to do because they were worth doing. And so that's, yes, and so that's where we started. So yes, there was a base level, but the problem is that that's not a measurement we normally measure because the Environment Agency's measurements are different, which is about the oxygen level, the ammonia level, and the solids level, which is different from the nitrates and phosphates levels. But they were assessed for that very early on in the process.
Okay, thank you. So the reason for asking this is because not everybody does. So some use sort of an algorithmic approach to it and say there are approximately two adults in a property that feeds into etc., and this then generates this amount of nitrates and phosphates. And my questioning was because I wanted to know that we use real results, not some derived from an algorithm, and that's what I was trying to get to. And
I will check that, but
thank you.
I know that the impact of each of those was.
I thought Mr. Hendy was saying that it was a biochemical analysis.
Yes, thank you. So where we've upgraded the sites, the phosphorus nitrates results are published on the website, as Mr. Hendy said. And where the Itch and View site has been upgraded as well, we also put those on the website. The EA required monitoring, which I believe is done monthly at all sites, does not measure phosphates or nitrates. But as Councillor Porter says, when you were looking at the viability, which is actually associated with the likely yield as well in terms of credits, you did look at current phosphate and nitrate generation. It is not formulaic, it is tested, and that is what is required by Natural England. The formulaic method that you referred to is the one used by Natural England to try to work out how many credits are required for a particular dwelling, I believe.
It's on the website under housing performance, and it's nutrient and water quality. Councillor Laming.
Thank you. On page 63, you've got repair AV panels to the Vortex car park. Do they really need repairing then? Or was it just vandalism?
It was vandalism, Chair.
I also noticed that you've got an application for smart export guarantee. Wouldn't that have been put in when we originally put the panels up in the first place?
Councillor Cutler. Can you turn on your microphone, please?
Sorry, I don't have the full details of this. I can come back to Councillor Laming with the details unless any of the officers present.
Could we also check,
I think,
whether we've done this for the offices and for the leisure centre?
yeah, okay, I will follow that one up.
Thank you.
Can that be circulated to all of the committee, please? Councillor Cutler. Can the response to that be circulated to us all? Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, just one more, please. You've also got on the previous part where you're saying that you'll put a tender out for a survey for solar panels on small properties. I thought we did the council estates several years ago when we looked at it and we looked at the state of the roofs and whether they could take panels. So are we just doubling up on our consultations? Yeah, it's actions for the next quarter. That's page 63 as well. It's the last bit, first paragraph of the first of actions for the next quarter.
Sorry, I think this is there had been some surveys and we've now narrowed down to some full technical surveys before some final decisions on some small stuff.
I seem to remember that happened probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
I think this has been a further look at it in the light of improvements in technology. Simon's got some response there.
Yeah, may I? You're exactly right. There was a survey across the district to look at opportunity. This is for specific small schemes where a business case has been proven. So it's specific to that. It doesn't double up on what's happening before.
Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. On page 70, I'm just interested in the waste target GF5, whether this is another one of those where the quarterly figures then add up to what the target is, which is an annual figure, where we've got sort of quarter three 103.291 ranging down to 97.98. And the actual target is less than 420 kilograms per household. So I'm just wondering, is that my assumption that, you know, you take the 4 quarters and add them up and that then becomes that target of 420?
Chair, yes, that's absolutely correct. For GF5, it is the sum of the 4 quarters compared to that target for the year.
Okay, I was just going to, if not, suggest that we might sort of reduce the target, because obviously we're about sort of 4 times higher than each of the individual quarters. But thank you. I wanted to clarify that before making that suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Cutler, you said that there were no other changes other than the introduction of local government reorganisation. But within that same section, we appear now to have dropped TC25.
The TC25 programme is now absorbed into the local government reorganisation project, and so it's although it continues, it's a subsection of that. Miss Keys will explain the full detail of how this has worked out, but our attention has to move towards LGR.
Yes, please, Miss Keys.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you'll recall, I set out in the budget report that came to Council last week that TC25 has now become an embedded part of the way that Winchester City Council works. So it's no longer a Tier 1 corporate project. It's been embedded in our ways of working. So the monitoring of that will you'll see within the finance section of this report. So we'll continue to monitor progress against that. We've embedded the ways of working within the culture of the organisation, and as Councillor Cutler has said, the Tier 1 corporate project is now focused on LGR.
Answer your question. Thank you. Councillor Buffy.
Yes, just on page 71, where the footnotes there in terms of the recharging of electricity in the Guildhall is recharged a percentage of the usage. I'm just wondering how we work out the percentage of whatever the relevant occupants of this building are, and actually make that recharge. I've just got a feeling that we don't use this building very much. And therefore would expect there to be almost all of the consumption being recharged to other tenants. Thank you.
I don't think it's quite as simple as that, because the Guildhall needs to be kept at a reasonable temperature. The lights come on, so I assume that our energy manager it has some role in making that calculation, and I'm sure, given the amount of savings he's already created for this council, he's doing a very good job of that, and that it is a fair system. I can't tell you how he does it, but I'm fairly confident that he's been doing a very good job and saved us a lot of money so far.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on the Q3 report? Any debate? Councillor Bolton.
I remain disappointed over TC25, and that rolling it into business as usual, when to my eyes that actually achieved 50% of the target, I think is pushing things, frankly. And I'm disappointed with that, because I think the need for that type of rigour is without a doubt an essential part of the climate that we find ourselves in at the moment. So I think that if it were that it was a roaring success in what we've managed to achieve, I would agree wholeheartedly. but because you know, it wasn't by anybody's measure, I think that feels a bit of a cop out, if I'm honest.
Not really, it's debate, Councillor Cutler.
No, I realise it's
So not really.
not really. No, I realise that. It's just that you did in the last sections.
Sort of clarification. Yeah. Any further debate? No. So the only recommendation I've got was regarding the smart export guarantee. I'm coming back to the committee on that. So thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Sorry, to Councillor Bolton's point, did this, I mean, this committee can make a recommendation to Cabinet that well, I think Councillor Botts probably word it better than me, but we could make a recommendation about TC25 to Cabinet. They don't.
You mean that it's drawn back out separately as a separate measurable entity? Councillor Pett, do you have some input?
Well, only to say that from what Councillor Cutler said earlier, it is still being measured. It's just not being measured as a separate entity in this particular report. So as long as we get visibility of that measurement, then I don't see we have much of a problem.
Councillors Bolton and Wallace.
And to what extent, because that local government reorganisation sheet doesn't bring out for me all the parts of TC25 and projects that are being explored and that sort of thing. Could it?
Yep, Mrs. Case.
If I can just help to give some clarity. So we've absolutely not ceased TC25, and the intention is that the progress against TC25 and further savings will be set out in the financial monitoring part of this report. So committee will continue to have visibility of progress made. Obviously, in the light of LGR, the amount of transformational, big bang transformational change that the council is able to make, given the 2-year window of preparing for change for LGR, has been limited. But where we are able to make transformational change, for instance, we've heard planning colleagues this evening talk about digitalisation of planning, we are pressing ahead with those, and then any savings that we realise from those will be set out in this report for members, but it will be in the finance section rather than it being a tier 1 corporate project.
Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 9, to note the committee current work programme, pages 117 to 118. Are we happy to note that? Councillor Wallace?
Sorry, is there any clarification about what that means? So our work programme going forward, it consists of one item, so but it was...
That's the local plan adoption piece.
Yeah, so
that's a special meeting that's being held. It has been to consider the recommendations from the inspector, and whilst we can't scrutinise the policies further because it's been through the inspector, etc., it's scrutinising the process that went into sending the local plan to the inspector, how we're dealing with their feedback, and that we're comfortable that it's all been done how we'd want it to be. Which is why it's only a 2-hour meeting and not a 12-hour one as we've had previously.
thank you.
That's correct, Councillor Porter, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So we're noted. I'm glad I knew the answer to that question as well. That would have been awkward, wouldn't it? Item 10, to note the latest forward plan of key decisions, page 119 to 126. Noted. Fabulous. Thank you. Formal business of this evening concluded. Have a lovely evening.